And let me just do a what if. I mean, if I had been in Congress back when No Child Left Behind was being pushed by George W. Bush and Ted Kennedy arm in arm doing their dance around the country, okay, which I thought was kind of an unusual dance, I could tell the members of Congress, I want you to know what's involved in this. And I could tell them, here's what the UN agreement says, which George W. Bush, as the executive, has agreed to, no Senate vote. And here's how they match up. They are two sides of the same coin. And I would call the people's attention the fact that it sure looks like we're implementing UN education policy. And do we want to do that? And by the way, there's a lot of reason we don't. Now I have to tell you one quick story. And I'm trying to keep these down. But I have spoken at education conferences around the country on the relationship between UN accords and U.S. education policy. Okay, I know this like the back of my hand. So about that's probably 3 years ago now, I have been invited by the Arizona State Senate Education Committee with the House Education Committee present to come and give them a briefing on federal education policy, especially No Child Left Behind. Okay. And so I say, well, if you pay my way, I'll go. Arizona in the winter? Yeah, that's all right. And you don't have to pay me any stipend, just pay my plane fare and a hotel, which they did. So I appeared before the House and Senate Education Committees in the state of Arizona, and it just happened to be the day where the teachers were at the Capitol. Okay. And it wasn't planned that way, it just happened to be that way. And so I'm standing here at the podium, and I've got about 25 legislators in front of me, and it is the House and Senate Education Committees for the state of Arizona. And I've got something like 300 public school teachers, all union members, sitting behind me. And I'm talking about federal education policy, No Child Left Behind. And so I explain how this is not good for education, how it's not designed to raise the achievement of all students. And as I start talking about it, I hear behind me the teachers. And then I hear behind me, yes, it's the teachers. I mean, you want a wonderful setting for talking to House and Senate Education Committees, have public school teachers applauding you as you're talking. They knew what it was. They knew what I was saying was absolutely true. And I was waiting for one of them to be saying, preach it, brother. But fortunately, they didn't get quite. But they were quietly applauding as I was speaking. And so I often, when I talk to people about this, will say, bring me a teacher who will say that No Child Left Behind federal education policy, Race to the Top, Goals 2000, has been helpful to them in their teaching. And have them come in and say, yes, this federal education policy helped me. And I have yet to have a teacher come forward. There might be one out there in New York, I don't know. So, I believe that according to the Constitution, any policy-making role of the Department of Education is a violation of the U.S. Constitution. And so I think some of the funding can be done that we do through Education Department. I'm fine with that. But no policy-making role. And so in terms of cutting expenditures, we can eliminate the Department of Education. And it would do us good in all kinds of ways. Right now, schools get stuck with all the bureaucratic red tape. Why not just give them the money and skip the hassle? I'm going to take questions that gentlemen that haven't asked before. Yes, sir.
They established a commission to balance the budget, and that's your main goal, is to balance the budget.
Yes. Sounds good.
I listened to the debate, and it sounds like all of them were in favor of balancing the budget, but nobody knew where they were going to get the money, and so the consensus was that they couldn't do anything about it in the end. Do you think you can change it?
I can't. They didn't talk to me. Okay. Let's talk about some of the ways where we can make cuts. Now, like I say, the plan I'm putting forward, which is totally reasonable, requires us to cut 3% a year. But we have to do that each year for 5 years. Okay? Where are we going to find the money? Well, let me give you first, some real close personal stuff, and then let's look at some big picture things. North of Grand Rapids, Minnesota, as we speak, There is a $50 million so-called science project being conducted, all federal money, that is creating greenhouses out in the peat bogs north of Grand Rapids, bringing money into Minnesota, I guess you could say. The purpose of the study is to study the effects of climate change on peat bogs. Now I think about how that $50 million could be used to finish Highway 14. Okay? I mean, I believe in priorities too. And I think that money could be better used to finish Highway 14, to be very frank. And could we live without that peat bog study? I'm convinced we could. Okay, now that's small stuff. The problem is, this story is being replayed a million times. Whether it's peat bogs or some other stupid thing. All right? Why do these things go on? Because there are no limits. There's no prioritizing. Congress just spends. So where can we get some of the big money? All right? Let's take the matter of Medicaid fraud. In the state of Minnesota, there are 4 or 5 public figures who have been aggressively speaking out on the need to crack down on Medicaid fraud in Minnesota. And I'm not talking here about people at the bottom. I'm talking about at the top. 4 HMOs that have never been audited. Okay? Never been audited with regards to the way they handle Medicaid. A Department of Education that has essentially said that it has been overcharging the taxpayers both at the federal level and at the state level. Okay, this is what's going on in Minnesota. Nationwide, Congressman Isaac's committee's research staff estimated that Medicaid fraud, this kind of fraud, top-level fraud, not by the little guys, by the big guys, could easily be costing us $100 billion a year. Okay, a year. Now that's over half. We stopped that. Why is that going on? Because neither the federal government or the state government has much interest. They just look the other way. It's a nod and a wink. No, we don't care. Okay, we have to care. So we put a stop to that. That's up to $100 billion a year. We've got over half of what we need in the first year. I want you to know I'm categorically opposed to subsidies, bailouts for corporations. Like General Motors, so far we're $36 billion in the red in our bailout of General Motors, and every day that number grows. Why? Because we own a lot of stock. GM stock with the Volt and all, not doing that well. We should have let General Motors simply go bankrupt, reorganize, become a leaner and meaner machine like Northwest Airlines did. What business do we have bailing out General Motors? So you have to save all that money. We already talked about the military bases. Can we make other reductions in the military? I'm convinced we can without weakening our national defense. Then let's take the matter of Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac. And I could talk all night about Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, but you don't want to hear everything I have to say, but I will say this. Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac under President Obama has a line of credit to the Treasury Department. Okay? How many of you knew that? You probably heard it from me, right? You probably heard it from me. Not many people know that. A line of credit. In 2012, Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac are expected to draw $200 billion of our tax money that we don't have. All right? So what is being done to change this? Nothing at all. Just goes on year after year after year. So who is Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac? It consists of mostly large banks. And but other investors, not just banks, other investors. And see, they made a bet. They made a bet that they could buy stock in Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, and that when push came to shove, the federal government would come in and bail them out, even though the federal government doesn't have to do that. Their bet was right. But gee, they made the investment, they're making the money. I think they should share in the cost. So, but we can't let that go on year after year after year. Okay? Can't let it go on. So we have to start cutting back there. Now, let me mention one more thing. If you read what I said at Farm Fest, one of the things I said is that the food stamp system is broken. And I do not object to people taking food stamps that need it. Okay, and I'm all in favor of helping needy people. I want you to know that. And yesterday, Congressman Wall said over half of the people on food stamps are over 65 or under 3. I want you to know that is not true. Okay? No way, Jose. It's not true. So what has happened? Well, there are incredible incentives built into the food stamp program. Like I said, I'm not against food stamps. I'm all for helping the poor. But there are incredible incentives built in for states to get as many people on food stamps as they possibly can. Plus, you've got the USDA spending millions of our tax dollars advertising. What? You're not on food stamps? Come on, come on, come on, get on the train. Is that a good use of our tax money? I just don't think that's a high priority when it comes to prioritizing, all right? So what has happened? 4 years ago, we spent $30 billion a year on food stamps. This year, we're spending 72. It's more than doubled, way more than doubled in 4 years. Why? It's because the system is structured to mushroom way out of control. It's built that way. It's built that way. Well, hey, take a look, guys. The American public needs to realize the party's over. I mean, can we continue to do business that way? We cannot. So how overly generous are the benefits? Let me be explicit. A couple, well, let's take a family of 4. Mom and dad are not married. Why do I say that? Because food stamps discriminates against married people the same way that Obamacare discriminates against married people. I want you to know, 2/3 of the people on food stamps are unmarried. Why? Well, one of the reasons is you qualify much more easily if you're not married. So what in heaven's name business does government policy have discriminating against married people, which is built in the system in all kinds of places, including food stamps? Okay, let's take our example. Family of 4, couple not married, can make $49,500 a year and still be on food stamps in Minnesota. Now, how many of you think that is a reasonable, that's a reasonable program? Does anybody think that's okay? See, I mentioned that yesterday in foods at Farm Fest, and what does Tim Walz do? He demagogues it and tries to make it sound, see, I mean, if you want to have a reasonable program, that means you're against poor people. I mean, this is what the typical politicians do all the time. I want you to know, ladies and gentlemen, if we don't start turning these things around, I mean, we're gone. So, what do? You put a limit on how much you can spend for food stamps, and then you figure out a way to make it work the best that you can. But we cannot continue to spend money we don't have. All right?
Thank you.
Now, I can keep going, but I just want to give you some examples, and I think the examples give you the picture. It's not that tough. Okay? It's not that tough to find places where we can. It's simply being good managers. It's simply being good managers. But we have to change the system if we're going to be good managers. Now, change the system. I want to mention one last thing. A lot of on this, and then I want to go to this other question. A lot of us watched the Republican presidential debates. I mean, I watched as many as I could. I just find this fascinating. How often did the debt come up in the presidential debates? Almost never, right? And then only in passing. Ladies and gentlemen, this is clearly the biggest issue. But the political pundits don't see it, or don't say it, or don't want it. But for me, I'm out talking to the public. I don't talk to the political pundits. I talk to the people. And clearly, the public recognizes that this is the issue. When I walk in parades, and I've been in about, I think, 25 or so far, 2 more this weekend. A lot of you know I don't go down the center of the street. I go on the curb because I want to talk to people. And I always introduce myself the same way. I introduce myself saying, hi, I'm Al Quist, candidate for 1st District Congress. I'm the guy that wants to balance the budget and balance it in 5 years. I have given that introduction to many hundreds, probably thousands of people. I have yet to get one negative response. Okay? That's why I believe we can turn this around, because the public is figuring it out, or has it figured out already. And if I didn't think the public was with us, I would be in my fishing boat. Other questions? Yes?